all rise and shine, huh? Some of you are going to watch my stream later. Man, oh man, a couple of days ago, I've been having like a serious debate with people. What is nationalism? And people sound like they really don't get it. So I found something very interesting, and it just made my day. That how it's a documentary that how nationalism destroyed the Middle East. The funny thing is, I've been saying that, but no, everybody has a difficult time playing who's superior, whose religion is better than to come to statistics. When you see world's different regimes who did the similar things, people don't want to look at those things. And I find that quite fascinating. So like it's like when you're having a debate with someone. Are you going to blame it religious nationalism, or are you going to blame it the religion itself? They're two different things. Religion is supposed to be your faith with God, and nationalism is actions that you do in public. I've been saying this for 3-4 years, that it is nationalism that destroyed the Middle East. And luckily, who would have thought, somebody actually made a video about that yes, it was nationalism that actually destroyed the Middle East. But there you go, back to base one again. Nobody likes to read, nobody likes to study, but everybody just loves making content and saying stuff on social apps and having debates, judging one another. And for me, that's a waste of time. I stopped doing that. I stopped sitting in debates with like people, listening to them on Twitter and all that other stuff. It's a waste of my head. Same stuff, rather than Israeli, Arabs, whatever. It's a waste of my head. And now we're going to see why it's a waste of my time, and I'm going to show you why it is a complete waste. People just don't see it yet. People think the world is stupid and life just begun, and you are going to find out how. So let's look in, guys, and then I'm going to review some stuff that I've been reviewing for 3-4 years now, and people still don't see it. Maybe you'll see it with a video. So let's go. I'm going to put it up. We're going to watch a YouTube documentary, and I'm going to show you what is nationalism. I've been saying this forever, and people didn't want to agree with me. That is absolutely fine. We'll still do it. Add to scene. There it is, guys. How did nationalism destroy Middle East? I've been saying that. People still don't get it, and here we are. Listen away.
The 19th and 20th centuries were a time of seismic change in the Middle East. Outdated state institutions, which had derived their legitimacy from the monarch and the ulama, began to decay until collapse.
Didn't I say about the monarchies? Ring, 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 that nobody listened to, not even Israelis. Like some Israelis did, some didn't. And they're like, no, it isn't. Here we go, back to base one. Monarchies, here you are, the monarchies, before nationalism stepped into the picture. Listen away.
The ever-expanding deficit in efficiency and innovation between Europe and Middle Eastern states became evident when new colonial powers began poaching for historic ports and trade routes.
I believe I've said that, but listen away.
By the early 20th century, an Ottoman or Persian citizen would have seen a state that governed poorly or a state that no longer governed at all, whilst foreign troops occupied the edges of those empires before encroaching on the center.
Everybody's like, oh no, empires are not important, but debating religion is important. Oh no, empire is not important, but debating religion is important, and just accuse to then to review statistics. So here we are back to base one, and we are reviewing empires right in here, literally. Listen away.
This disillusionment with ancient indigenous institutions caused the intelligentsia of the day to look westward. If Europe dominates the world and dominates our countries, they must be doing something we're not. As imperial collapse transitioned into European colonialism, an indigenous answer to their efficiency and ethos that had created this dynamic was required.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it.
Half of the stuff I already said, here you go, he's talking about it. Listen.
The sultans and sheikhs of old did not prove up to the challenge, so a new idea had to be introduced to unite the masses and reconstitute Turkish, Arab, and Iranian society. Ironically, the ideological response conjured up to combat European encroachment was the very same one born in and popularized by Europe: nationalism.
Ring, ring. Where does that ring a bell? How many times I said that? I must have said it like 20 times to the smartest of smartest, the biggest billionaire content creator, that you are not looking hard enough. You are not studying hard enough. I said to the smartest of smartest content creator, it is nationalism. It is nationalism. It is nationalism. And here you are, from monarchs till now, you are listening about nationalism. Listen to it. It's not like the first. Many regimes have did nationalism. From day one till history till now, US probably the last to ever enter this picture. Completely last. But listen away. Oh my God.
Before we delve into the history of it, let's first examine the philosophy behind nationalism. Nationalism is the belief that the nation and the state are intertwined. The state.
Where does that ring a bell? Come on, everybody. You're smart. You went to college. I feel like it's pointless to go to college if you're not going to understand any of this stuff. That means that the state and religious ideologies, they're combined by, and this was combined by militaries, okay? Not the monarchies. Monarchies gave you freedom, okay? Let me repeat myself. The monarchies gave you freedom. And this is what I'm debating on Twitter lately, that some people don't seem to get it, that you do not want to welcome any nationalism, especially after observing this, and especially after when the militant regime leaders came. Hitler was a military regime. Hitler was a military regime. Spain used to be a military regime. Italy did a military regime. You can look all this stuff up. Wherever there's a military regime, you do not have freedom. Military nationalism. Any type of nationalism, freedom does not exist. The monarchies gave it, learned from Reza Pahlavi's father, Prince Faisal of Iraq, who died. That's when freedom existed, and people from all different countries, like, they had an organization before the birth of the West, so some of the kings of the past did welcome the West's independence, like, welcome to the club, how you doing, yada, yada, yada. But where did the twist come from? That's what people need to be studying. If everything was good, where did the twist come from? Yes, I'm saying it. Yes, there's two different ideology, how back in the day when Jews or Christians lived here, how jizya was used. Monarchy did make you pay a tax, which is normal. Some people do make you pay tax. It's not the first time, but you were first-class citizens. First-class citizens means you help build the country. If you were second-class citizens, you don't even get to jump in or say a hello or give any of your ideas in the country if you are not first-class citizens. Only first-class citizens help build the country. Yes, you paid a jizya. Then when military regime showed up in the middle around like the 1900s, they tripled your taxes. They took everybody's rights. They took almost everything. They didn't give any Muslim females rights as females. A lot more. And you wonder for a minute, oh, where does it come from? And I say it over again, does anybody study what the hell is nationalism? It's the most toxic thing ever made in human history. People still debate religion, but not study nationalism. Attach nationalism and religion together, watch what the hell it does.
Is no longer a large-scale tax farmer, but the defender of the preservation and interests of the nation, an entity bound together by a shared identity. This identity is formed through history, language, culture, territory, or in even rarer cases, religion. Traditionally,
where does that ring a bell? Let me repeat myself. Religion. I wonder who's been barking like an idiot to the smartest of smartest content creator. Religious nationalism. Religious nationalism. That's what it. No, it's religion. Nationalism. It's religious nationalism, and now you are listening to it with your own freaking ears. Religious nationalism. Keyword, nationalism. Listen away.
Nationalism supposed that the nation is not invented, but rather primordial and natural. The ideology holds that the nation had glorious ancestors who accomplished glorious feats, Thus, members of the nation feel motivated and capable of asserting themselves on the world stage. Generally, there are two types of nationalisms: the political territorial and the ethnic organic. The political territorial school of thought asserts the unity.
Where does that ring a bell? I'm gonna clap. Hell yeah, I am. Where does that ring a bell? I've been barking like a dog for the smartest of smartest creator. Listen to your damn ears. Clean your damn ears. Stops. Faith is supposed to be a faith at home, not religious enforced nationalism. Nationalism, and you're now listening to how the Middle East got destroyed by political, religious nationalism. Here you have it.
Unity of all those living on a certain piece of land, while the latter posits that those who speak the same language and share the same culture, even across disparate lands, are one people and should be reconstituted as such. Both of these ideas were practiced by different Middle Eastern nationalists, oftentimes with great contradictions. Even if it would prove to produce practical problems, nationalism was the dominant ideology of the Middle Eastern masses during the quest for independence. Logically, it was also the main ideology of the states that emerged after liberation was achieved. For a variety of reasons that will be discussed, nationalism was sidelined in this region by other ideologies in the late 20th century, but its effects have profoundly shaped Middle Eastern society and politics. To understand the intricate situation, one must analyze nationalism's history here, from its birth at the turn of the 20th century, its zenith in the middle, and its decline by the century's close.
Let's listen about Turks.
At the beginning of the 19th century, nationalism stepped up to fill the vacuum left by religion's absence in politics throughout Europe. At the same time, some of the Ottomans' Balkan territories were clamoring for independence. First the Serbs, then the Greeks, and so on. With Ottoman foes like the Russians giving key aid to these separatist movements.
Where does that ring a bell? So, remember when I said to study about the Russian Empire because the Russian Empire did no different than the Ottoman Empire? Okay, so in the early days of Russia, even though people don't really believe me, it may be Orthodox Christian today, but Russians have also imprisoned their own people. They imprisoned females, and they were against female rights. In fact, did you know in Russia, I'm not sure today, but long back, when I was trying to look for a Russian content creator, Russian content creators were not literally allowed to talk about Russia. Just like if you lived in Iran, you could not talk about the IRGC or make videos about it. You would have been killed. Same for Russians. You could not talk about Putin or what he does or whoever the leaders, how Russia's been out throughout the years. You couldn't talk about that. They would have done something to you. For the Russians. So see how these ideologies have a play. Russians Orthodox Christian today. In Spain is technically Latin Christian. So all these countries, they have did it. And I have a friend who was listening to me who's Indian. I'm going to tell you something. You left me a question. Tell me one religion that has never fought the Indians. You still tell me today that Muslims and Christians, they still kind of like go after Hindus because of the paganism days and their wars. That should give a hint. But the monarchies and their sources to prove it, the monarchies and the Jews, the Muslim monarchs, the Jews helped build Muslim communities before the military nationalism showed up. Otherwise, if they didn't help, their history would not exist, and their locations that they helped build would not be there in history today. But they are, because they helped build it, and monarchs let them build it while they were Muslims. And yes, in fact, before my Afghanistan video got blocked, that should be my biggest proof. My Afghanistan video and the Afghanistan's leader, who was a king, when it was welcoming the West, it clearly stated, we are the most open-minded Islamic country. Before the monarchs, got killed, we are open-minded. Yeah, if you're a nationalist and narrow-minded and believe in nationalism, like how, for example, whether it's a Muslim or a Christian who believes that religion is the only way to live through in a country, just rather it's my religion or your religion. Religion is the only way. Then to keep religion separate from the country culture, right? But some people didn't think like that. And some people are still rewinding time today, believe it or not, but yes.
The Sultan began to lose his territories in the Balkans. Being the adept empire builders they were, the Ottomans soon realized the necessity of resolving ethnic and social tensions before they eat the empire from within. As a result, the Ottomans launched the Tanzimat reforms in order to modernize the empire.
Modernize. Where does modern ring a bell? Raza Pahlavi. He believed in modernization. He was thrown. Prince Faisal, he believed in modernization, which means like welcoming other cultures, it welcomed the West, things like that. And Jews helped build a high community in Iraq back at his time. Modernization, now if you look at today, like I'm surprised because when Muslim countries got destroyed due to nationalism, American Christians are now learning, like, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to share history and teach our religion into schools. And some Christians clearly stated that, people need to stop going in bikini, that you're not a real Christian. They have no idea. When nationalism comes in and you don't get to do what you like to do, that's a whole separate chapter. You don't get to drink what you like, you don't get to eat what you like. You have to work accordingly to the political rules that the government launches, which happen in these countries.
Along with institutional changes, the biggest change was ideological. Instead of a patchwork of religious communities, or millets, the empire promoted Ottomanism, a shared civic identity. Non-Muslims were declared equal under the law and now had civic duties, including conscription and community leaders swearing.
So there we are. Golden number, 1876. I reviewed this before. So before 1876, before the American independence, before American independence came in 1776. So if you read before 1776, and the non-Muslims who lived in Muslim countries, they helped build the society. Now, how did stuff started to crash? So when nationalism and freedom was set aside, and literally there was a lot of, what's a perfect word? I'm trying to think of a perfect word. A lot of enforcement that religion laws is the only laws that the country is going to follow, just like Christian nationalism right now. People are believing that, no, our religion needs to be in schools. No, our religion needs to be in school. But I said it before and I'll say it again. When it comes to religion, not everybody's going to obey the rules. That's exactly what happened in their time. But yeah, listen away. Leaders oath loyalty to Sultan, which would be a king.
Bring oaths of loyalty to the Sultan. By 1876, the reforms seemed to be working, as a constitution and an elected parliament were introduced.
Didn't I say Muslim countries once upon a time had a constitution that nobody ever knows about? Yes, it did have a constitution, but where did it come from? Not many people believe it seriously or take it seriously. It did. But the question is, what destroyed it? And I was telling that to the highest of number content creator, that you are not reading enough. Muslim countries had a society with Jews, Christians, everybody. It's just people don't know what happened in the middle, and they don't like to read in the middle. But as I kept saying this over and over and over again, yes, it was nationalism that destroyed society that not many people know about. But listen away.
Despite this, ethnic tensions persisted. Not long after, when uprisings broke out in the Balkans, the Ottomans responded harshly. Russia and Romania intervened, seizing land in the Kafkaz and Balkans, and helping to create an autonomous Bulgaria. Suddenly, everything was being undone. Sultan Abdulhamid, once a supporter of reform, shut down the parliament and ruled with an iron fist.
That's a Muslim king.
He expanded infrastructure but crushed political dissent, alienating the very groups the empire needed to hold together. This did, however, allow him to gain a hold of his faltering empire for the next 3 decades. But in 1908, after decades of the Hamidian police state, a group of officers known as the Young Turks staged a coup. The Young Turks themselves succumbed to a counter-coup after rigging elections in 1912. Meanwhile, the empire was besieged.
Okay, 1912. I mean, 1900s is the worst year of all time. 1900 is when all the military, like the Islamist military who supported the Mufti, it supported Hitler because Hitler itself was a military regime. And I was studying about Hitler, even though some Christians say, oh, he was a Christian, but then sources say it was these atheists. Like this lady, she's literally against her own like teaching, and she's like, oh, they're not the follower of the crest, yada yada. She's writing me on Twitter that they don't believe in the crest, and she's like sending me pictures of Hitler, dude. I'm like, I can't respond to that because it's true. Muslims went against the Mufti when and Hitler made it a law that you could not help Jews, and I was reading some Christians did it too, but like these are the things that people need to study. So the Mufti and the Hitler, who were both military regimes, stick to one, and the kings, just like you're reading about the kings now, they were against it, and the military nationalists ended up killing the monarchies. The 1900 changed everything, and life has never been the same since when the military nationalists took over.
Italy invaded Libya, and Balkan states, long eyeing Ottoman land, launched a joint assault to terminate the Eternal Empire's presence in Europe once and for all. Despite the empire's size, their forces were crushed within a year. On top of losing nearly all European holdings, the Ottoman failure to protect and evacuate Balkan Muslims led to mass ethnic cleansing, causing public outrage that the Young Turks used to reclaim power. This unassuming shift would set the stage for a new Middle East.
That rings a bell now, doesn't it? If you read your 1900 and all the way down from Iraq to Libya to Turkey to Iran, I would say, was the last from 1979. But like all these places, Pakistan was under a military regime. Jordan itself, it came during the time where militant nationalism was in charge. So that's why there's no Jews today. So like all these places, they have a hidden story that not many people talk about. And I've been saying this for 3-4 years of highest content creator that you need to look. It's there. You heard it. Muslim countries did have a constitution. Pakistan used to have a constitution, but what killed it? It was the military freaking nationalists from the times of the monarchs till 1900. 1900 was the toxic year. From that time period till now, everything was destroyed, and just now we're seeing the dust, basically. Call it Iraq and Syria got a little bit of a starting of a new life, but talk to me when it's successful.
Rather than interpret their defeat as a failure of Ottoman statecraft, the CUP came to detest Ottomanist ideology. Instead of the different millets uniting around the palace, certain groups would now be...
Millets? Military? Millets? Didn't I not say that like a moron? Military nationalist. No, it's Islam. Military nationalist. No, it's Islam. Military nationalist! And here you are, listening to the story.
Prioritized. For the Young Turks, the empire was a Muslim/Turkish enterprise, not a pluralistic one, so allegiance was defined by religion and ethnicity, not citizenship. This ideological shift showed in state policy. Before 1912, mentions of religion in atrocity reports were banned to maintain harmony. After the...
Yes, because like, okay, so this is where it comes in. I'll give an example what they mean by that. For example, even though I feel like Texas is doing a mistake, even though some Christians don't believe me until you get into the situation that Muslims been in years ago, especially the 1900. 1900 was the year all of Muslim countries were destroyed due to militant nationalism. So their ideology was that using religion, so when they use religious nationalism, religious military nationalism, so those who live there, like the Jews or the Christians and different type of Muslims, like Shias are always going to be different from Sunnis. Sunnis, they have their own weird way that coming from the person that wasn't even allowed in a Shia mosque, right? And then there's the Kurds, like different ethnic Muslims, right? So to them, like minus ethnicity and just do what we say. So for example, when Reza Pahlavi was in charge, even though I don't have a problem with the guy, but when he was in charge, he would not give rights to the Kurdish people, even though Kurdish technically are Muslims, but minusing ethnicity means You practice whatever we give you, whether you like it or not. So if I'm a different type of Muslim, and this is not my practice, let's say I'm a Kurdish versus whatever Shiite Muslim in Iran, and I want to practice my Kurdish style. But since there's no ethnicity chapter, and just, oh, it's Christians, and Christians are going to go through it too. For example, Catholics are different from Protestants, Orthodox, whatever, right? But let's say the schools say you are going to from now on practice Protestantism or Orthodox. Only one Bible can go into the school, and these different Christians say, that's not what we practice. Well, that's exactly what happened in the Muslim world. That, no, whatever we launch, that's the only thing you're going to study. But that's where ethnicity comes in, and ethnicity was erased. That terminology of ethnicity does not exist. It's just whatever we tell you to study, that's all you're going to study. And when ethnicity is erased, obviously, if you're a Jew or a Christian or different ethnic Muslim, like Coptic Christians, if you're a Coptic there, and you couldn't, sorry, because they erased the ideology of ethnicity.
The Young Turks' rise, the press emphasized sectarian conflict in the Balkans, and inflammatory speeches began targeting Christian minorities in Anatolia, despite their long coexistence with Muslims in the region.
Where does that ring a bell? I told you, Muslims, Christians did exist with the Jews, and everybody's like, but it's Islam. No, nationalism. And I kept telling them they helped build the economy. They were there, they helped build the economy. Now these militant nationalists showed up there, like killing everyone. Like, for example, some people say that, oh, ISIS was Sunni, but it's a nationalist organization. So if I'm a Kurd, or I want to be a Coptic, or I want to be whatever, I'm forced to be under the ISIS Sunni practice due to nationalism. If I'm a Shia, but I'm a Coptic Muslim, or I'm a Coptic Christian, or I'm a Jew, or I'm a different Orthodox Christian, if I'm forced to practice, oh no, you're only going to listen to Shiaism, that's going to be an enforcement. That's exactly what I fear today, that Texas may be on a good start, but there's another side that I'm not convinced at all because of this. And yes, there's going to be these problems because let's say a Catholic says, oh, that's not the book I read. I don't read Protestantism. I'm a Catholic. No, but it's Christian. You have to read. That's it. You're just a Christian and not different type of Christian. Same for the Muslims. I'm Muslim, but not different type of Muslim. And obviously you're not a Muslim in a different ethnicity because they erased the ideology. Ethnicity, yeah, you would be killed. Exactly right here. Listen to it. They killed the Christians after 1900 and militant nationalist takeover. And nationalism did destroy the Middle East because you erased the ideology of coexistence, you erase the ideology of ethnic groups, different type of faiths. Yeah.
The imposition of a Balkan context was inevitable when considering the experiences of two of the three pashas, Talat and Enver, who now unilaterally ran the empire. As a child, Talat's home in what is now Bulgaria was occupied by Russian troops, and in 1912, Bulgarian forces seized his town, massacring Muslims. Born in North Macedonia to a Turkish-Albanian family, Enver fought at least 54 battles against Bulgarian insurgents, whose nationalist ambitions ironically inspired him. Later on, the conquest and ethnic cleansing of his home province by Serbian troops only hardened his views. No person represents the transition from Ottomanism to Turkish nationalism better than Ziya Gökalp, the thinker considered the father of Turkish sociology and a convert to nationalist thought after the Balkan catastrophe. The aforementioned geographic nationalism was illogical to Gökalp, for he saw a unified culture as the key to a unified national conscience. With the flow of refugees into Anatolia and the feeling that the empire was on the brink permeating the public conscience, Gökalp envisioned Anatolia as the homeland for the area's Turks and the Muslim refugees from the Kafkas and the Balkans, who would be Turkicized in due time. This became the ideological basis for modern Turkey. Ataturk, the republic's founder, reportedly called Gökalp the father of his thought. Gökalp.
Now, I'm not surprised to read this because actually Turkey goes even though people be like, oh, it came from the Ottomans. No, I was asking an Iranian, and actually the Turks, I'm not sure what they were called before. Were they labeled Turkey? Turkey is just as old as Iran. and they go back from the times of the Greeks, the Armenians, as you're reading right now. And actually, an Iranian lady told me that no, Turkey is just as old as Iran, and the Turks go back way from times to the Greek empires and Armenian empires. Things may sound crazy, but yeah, this is where I tell you that you need to read about the empires and match the numbers and put the numbers together. But people don't like to do those things. But yeah.
Saw Greeks, Armenians, and Jews as undesirable, influenced policy even before Ataturk. He was close to Talat Pasha, who in 1913 deported 200,000 Anatolian Greek refugees from the Caucasus and the Balkans, who would be Turkicized in due time. This became the ideological basis for modern Turkey. Ataturk, the republic's founder, reportedly called Gökalp the father of his thought. Gökalp, who saw Greeks, Armenians, and Jews as undesirable, influenced policy even before.
So, like, undesirable means, like, okay, so the people who lived there at the time, like the Jews, the Armenians, undesirable means you do not want to consider them anything. That you can call a second-class citizen. That would be considered a second-class citizen. That you're undesirable, I don't want to consider you as anything. That would be considered you're undesirable. So, like, for example, I don't know, right now, I would say Jews are the most hated people. So are Muslims, like in front of Christians. Like, my friend went to talk to the government, and she's like, what about freedom of rights or whatever in this Texas or whatever? She spoke from her house in another state. Like, what if we do this? So they told her is that no, eventually it's going to get like this. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, you're going to have to move. So that, even though we didn't feel proud about it because we felt like we're getting treated like second-class citizens. And that's exactly what this is. So when you are undesirable, you are technically considered, well, a second-class citizen. What they're saying right here, undesirable.
Or Ataturk. He was close to Talat Pasha, who in 1913 deported 200,000 Anatolian Greeks, just the beginning of Anatolian Christians' bitter.
And they lived there. Didn't I tell you that? The Greeks, and like before nationalism took into the land, Jews lived there, Christians lived there, Muslims lived there. There's a saying that sometimes your enemies are actually telling the truth. So when people say, oh, Jews and Muslims and Christians, they lived happily together here, where, everywhere. You're right, they did. But this is what happened. Nationalism. And I'm saying it over and over like a maniac to the highest of highest creator. I even said it to Dan, that ex-Muslim on Twitter, that he's telling everybody to read his book, the guy from Jordan, Dan B, I can never say his name right, who wrote the Islam in Israel book. I kept telling him that your book is useless until you understand what nationalism is. So when your villains tell you that, hey, Jews and Muslims and Christians happily live together, they did. And when nationalism took over, what happened then? You're looking into it. You're reading it right here.
To experience. Beyond demographic change, cultural Turkification was imposed, even in areas where Turks were the minority, fueling further unrest in the ailing empire. Before discussing Ataturk, we must consider why Ottomanism collapsed so rapidly. First and foremost, governance was inept, thereby undermining trust in reform. Integration of the millets also never really took form. Christians faced unofficial discrimination, and Muslims dominated the government. Additionally, religious segregation in schools hindered the formation of a shared.
The militants and the nationalists. So let me recap what they mean by that. So religious segregations, 100 formation, shared identity, right? But nationalism, it's never going to work, okay? That's where actually like Alawites are dying, the Kurdish are dying, even though there's such thing as a Kurdish Christian, a Kurdish Jew, a Kurdish Muslim, right? But when you do not put ethnicity into the picture, and let's say I have one Quran, right? And I'm just using this as an example. Let's say I have one Quran, it's a Shia, Sunni, whatever it is, right? Even though they're both separate Qurans, but let's say I do. If I'm a Kurdish Muslim, and that is not my practice, that's not what I go for, but they're like, no, you're a Muslim. But they're like, but that's not the practice I do as a Muslim. They're going to kill me. Or Catholics versus Protestantism. Catholics say that is not my practice. We did it the other way, but the Protestants say, oh, you're not a Christian if you don't accept this, right? As long as they accept Jesus, they're technically still considered Christians. Coptics have their own thing, but no, you have to accept the Protestant way. So after all this difference, since ethnicity was erased, and obviously if you're a Jew or a Christian over there, you're probably going to be the second person in line versus nationalism, based on what they're saying. All these nationalist people, when they started to take over, a lot of the freedom for many people were erased, including different type of Muslims. But yeah, that's why you're going to see in history today, like, even though I find it really a little bit stupid or redundant, personally, that's just my opinion as a person, like how I see when Arabs say sometimes, oh, the Kurds are this, or Iranians saying stuff to the Kurds, or sometimes Arabs like from Saudi, even though they're my friends, but I don't agree with them when they say like the Druze, they're like this, they're terrorists, is that right? But I don't agree with them, because when I met a Jew, it was speaking, well, Arabic. And it was technically considered some portion of an Arab, not fully, but just because it comes from a different background or faith, would you just kill it? That is nationalism. All nationalism. You're looking at it, baby. That's all nationalism.
Identity. Meanwhile, groups like the Armenians lost their former privileges in the name of equality. Once known as the loyal millet, many Armenians began turning towards nationalism. Conversely, many Muslims felt blindsided by Christian commercial dominance. In the Ottoman Empire, there were capitulations. These bilateral agreements were struck during the heyday of the Sublime Porte, when the Ottomans were militarily dominant.
Boom! Military dominant. Didn't I say that? I wonder how many times have I said that. They're like, it's Islam. I'm like, it's military nationalism. No, it's Islam. It's military nationalism. There you're listening to it. So, so for example, this is where me and my friends get into a friendly debate and I feel like she's going to discover for herself now if Houston or Texas expands with the religious ideology newly launched. She's like, but no, there's different type of Christians. And I'm like, there's different type of Muslims. But when ethnicity, then they're like, but that's not a Christian. I'm like, okay, then if it's a different type of Christian, you have to put in ethnicity. There's just no way you can survive without it, because not every single Christian practices the same thing. You have to welcome ethnicity. And she's like, but how? I'm like, well, Protestants don't practice Catholics. Orthodox don't practice Protestantism, and there's the same for the Muslim world. Like there's the Shias, there's the Sunnis, there's the Kurds, there's the Sinns. They all have their different culture and practices, right? As long as they believe in Allah, they're still Muslim, but they have their different way and practices, right? So since ethnicity is not a thing, so whatever practice they put into the table, you're going to follow it or you're going to be killed, which technically happened to the Jews, different Kurdish people, the Druze and Alawites who are technically Shia. So all this nationalism turned into a disgusting jungle of the Middle East from 1900s, well, till now. But yeah.
They offered European traders entering the empire exemption from prosecution, taxation, conscription, and more. When the balance of power shifted to European states, they used them to prey on Ottoman ports and resources. Furthermore, powers such as Russia and France extended citizenship and therefore capitulations to many Ottoman Christians. The Christian control of commerce that ensued caused mass resentment amongst Muslims.
There we go, back to nationalism again. So like, once away from nationalism because of different practices, away from nationalism, once upon a time, Christians and Muslims lived just fine, and Jews were part of all that stuff. That someone Christian published this yesterday, and I didn't even know about it. I'm 39. I feel like I've been lied so much to, and I need to teach my kid some home education, right? So I found out, and I was shocked myself, that how European Christians enslaved Muslims. But where does that ideology come from? You would have to look into time, read and read what happened. So where nationalism comes in, there's violence, because like, no, you're just going to obey my religion. Oh, you're not just going to obey my religion. And if you're a Jew, you don't accept any of these religions. So you'll be like, either follow us or get out. That's technically what happened to the Jews, that you either follow us or get out. That's what happened to them. But like, so they've especially after the 1900s. So France, remember when I said that France is a Christian country? Russia, it expanded to a Christian country. Not many people believe me on that. Well, this should explain enough, because the French and the Russians, the times of the Ottomans, also had a critical play. All of this is when America didn't take place. Okay, so when people are like, oh, but America's the only country. No, you have to, if you want to talk about like history, you need to talk about all of Christian history, because America is Christian history. It didn't start there. It didn't start from Europe. It starts from here, all the way up and down, all the way to these empires and what happened in between.
Republic of Turkey is by far the most successful example of nationalism's implementation in the Middle East, though not without pitfalls. Following the Ottoman defeat, Anatolia was to be split between the British, Greeks, French, Italians, and Armenians, with a rump state left under Ottoman control. Turks rejected the colonization of their land, and Mustafa Kemal Pasha organized a new government and army in Ankara to expel the occupiers. He beat the French, Armenians, and Greeks, while the British and Italians agreed to evacuate. The Treaty of Lausanne, which guaranteed Turkey's borders, was signed in 1920.
All of this is 1900. 1900, remember what I said, that 1900 is the most critical time period ever, because that's when nationalism started to evolve in many subjects.
3. As Gökalp envisioned, Anatolia became a nation-state for the Turkish people. Mustafa Kemal's credibility as a liberator allowed him to make sweeping reforms. His political ideology can be encapsulated through the 6 arrows, with perhaps the 2 most consequential being nationalism and laicism, which can be thought of as a more aggressive version of secularism. An ardent secularist, he abolished the Ottoman Khilafah. His reforms espoused Western and nationalist ideals. For example, in place of Perso-Arabic, the alphabet was now Latin, which exponentially increased literacy. There was also forced westernization of dress and traditional Ottoman music.
Where does that ring a bell? Where does that ring a bell? So everybody's like, okay, remember when I said that all these countries, they have their own cultural dressing? Like Iran, right? You need to understand the difference between Iranian dressing and Western dressing coming into the country. It says right here, they were also forced to wear Westernization dresses. Traditional Ottoman music was shunned. So when Western culture came into Iran or Afghanistan or Turkey and all these other places, the monarchs welcomed it, but then there were nationalists. Like even today, I'll give you an example. Russians and the French, they used to be complete nationalists, and throughout time, you would ask yourself, why are they so against the West? Because West granted freedom. And these nations, throughout time, they never believed in the concept of freedom. You're reading about it in front of your eyes, that they worship nationalism. In 1900, it just came, and leaders supported it, and it evolved throughout time, which is why there were so many deaths. There were so many non-Muslims dead. There were deaths of the Muslims themselves from different practices. All the stuff, it just turned into a junkyard. And that's what I told my Christian friends too. You have no idea what you're talking about. Once you bring that ideology, not every Christian is the same Christian. So any Christian who rejects it, what are you going to do to it? Are you going to kill it? What are you going to do to it if it rejects your practice? Because that's not the type of Christian it is. Same for the Muslim world. Like along with Jews, Christians, different type of Muslims died too, who were like Kurdish, Alawites, or any other different ethnic group that I missed that lived in the Middle East. And the Western culture, I reviewed this on my stream, that was linked to Afghanistan, that anybody who sees like mini skirts or things like that, that is not Iran or Afghanistan's dressing. That's the Western culture entering into time period of the 1900s. You type, what is the Iranians' actual culture in dressing? You're going to see a difference from what it wears. And the Western culture of dressing came into the countries in the 1900s. 1900s. It's not the Iranians or Afghanis' original dressing, as people say, oh, they're wearing mini skirts and bikinis. No. That is Western dressing. And actually, bikini actually came from the French. Not a lot of people know that stuff, but yeah.
Music was shunned for the sake of Western-sounding songs or folk tunes. Women's rights were expanded and an active role for enlightened women in society was encouraged. Language was central to Ataturk's program. A campaign to enforce Turkish in public spaces included fines for using foreign languages. With that, a state-funded effort sought to purge Arabic and Persian words, replacing them with indigenous or sometimes French alternatives. When too many
here it is. Remember when I said so many people enforced languages? The French did it, the Arabs did it. Many people enforced different type of languages into Muslim countries, which is why here you're looking at, I believe this is Iran with the Persian language. So the French enforced their language and the Arabs did too. Many people from the early time period had enforced languages into these countries. That's what evolved the people with different languages. So like when I see people on Twitter say like, oh, that's not your original language, or your original dress code is this, but they don't even know that what time period did the West dressing come into these countries. And when they post like, oh, Iranians used to dress in like skirts and this, like when I show them, they had like nice gowns, because you can't dance in a bikini with a gowns. They used to wear gowns, and the drums and all the drums they used to play, and they wear all these jewels. That stuff came into the 1900s, and the French are actually the people who created like bathing suits and bikinis. West came way later with this culture. All the stuff that you're reading is a time period that expanded.
Loanwords remained, the Sun language theory was developed, claiming all languages originated from a Proto-Turkic source. There was an attempt to present the Republic as the culmination of Turkic history, even retroactively claiming the ancient Anatolians were Turks. This was of course a ridiculous claim to make, since Anatolia's Turkification really started in the 11th century with the Seljuks. But it did not matter, because it was Mustafa Kemal who built the Turkish state and institutions. It was he who restored diplomatic weight after decades of foreign domination. For recovering Anatolia and modernizing the country, he was given the surname Ataturk, father of the Turks. Today, he is Turkey's national hero.
What's the difference between these two lox bagels? This one is made from your average smoked salmon. This one is made from...
Okay.
Ataturk's elite reputation and previous Tanzimat reforms were key to his success, and though he was said to be a dictator to end all dictators, authoritarianism in Turkey lasted.
All dictators have one mindset. Just remember that. Whether you're looking at the Ayatollahs, whether you're looking at Erdogan, or whether you're looking at Putin, whether you're looking at Hitler, whether you're looking at the China's president, all dictators follow one mindset. That's all you got to know. They follow one mindset and culture.
Ataturk entrusted the military to preserve his secular nationalist order. This meant that when an undesirable government, often Islamically oriented, was elected, they would become the victims of a coup d'etat. This dogmatic adherence to secularism alienated many rural and conservative citizens, causing the slow formation of Islamist parties.
Boom! Remember when I said that okay, so you just saw Turkey welcoming the West culture and different languages, right? And now here it is, conservative citizens causing a slow formation of Islamist parties, materially of the government. Yes, so they first crashed the party, then they killed the kings, and they killed any leader who was against modernization. These are all nationalist militant who took over and made the entire civilization into nationalism. And then people are like, it's Islam. I'm like, it's nationalism. They're like, it's Islam. I'm like, it's nationalism. You're reading in front of your eyes how things started to evolve, because people did live there. And I gave you an example. If I'm a Kurdish and I don't want to practice Islam, but I'm a Kurdish Muslim, this is what I practice. And if I don't obey to the nationalist laws, I'm going to be killed for it. How's that religion? I mean, I'm a Kurdish Muslim. I'm a Muslim, right? But I have different practice. Where's my right for practicing different? And that's how many different type of Muslims died due to nationalism. Same for the Middle East. Whether you're a Jew, you're a Druze, you're a Christian, nationalism killed everything. And especially after the Islamist parties formed, slow formation of Islamist parties. Materially, the government, as in the military takeover.
Really, the government catered to the Mediterranean secular elite, while interior religious Turkey was neglected. Adding on, attempts to form a unitary Turkish identity were resisted by Kurds, who are a majority in the southeast.
This is where Kurdish came into the picture. Now you're learning about the Kurds. This is how Kurds stepped into the time period. Read about them, study about them.
Country. After a number of Kurdish rebellions were put down in the 1920s and 30s, the region was ruled by martial law until 1952. The Kurds faced an attack on their very cultural identity as the Turkish government took extreme measures to Turkicize them. In the 1980s,
why does that ring a bell? Didn't I say that the Kurdish Muslim have a different type of practice, or like Sindhi Muslims or Baloch Muslims, or like Kazakhstan? Did I say that right? They all have a different type of practices. But since the country already welcomed nationalism, so just like now they need to erase their Kurdish identity. Look at how they're dressed. You're looking at hijabs, everything. They're wearing it. They're Muslims. Since the country welcomed nationalism, they were forced to be called Turks. But technically, they are not Turks, but they were forced to follow the Turkish culture, everything. And like I said, the expansion of nationalism, it all started from the 1900s. The religions, they already took place after 600 and all that. After that, you need to read your way freaking down and see what the hell happened. I'm showing it to you. Nationalism expanded, and you're looking at it.
The Kurdish language was even banned as President Evren denied their existence. Instead,
Iran did the same thing because the Raza Pahlavi, he was a Muslim king, yes, he was, and he may be a good to the Palestinians and the Israelis, but when it comes to local housing, all monarchs, they may have given freedom at certain point, but when nationalism came into the picture, they have taken some rights.
Referring to them as Mountain Turks. This tension between the state and a large minority led to a bloody conflict in 1978 that only ended in May 2025, with more than 40,000 people losing their lives and tens of billions of dollars spent by the government. Overall, Turkey under military rule stagnated. That was until Recep Tayyip Erdogan was elected in...
This is where he came into the picture, and now you are learning about what laws did he launch. This is what he entered. Little years before the Kurdish execution, he was elected, and how nationalism started. I remember I said it, the year that nationalism started to expand was the 1900s, and it started with the Kurdish people. You're going to see a similar story in Iran when Prince Raza Pahlavi was in charge, because nationalism expanded. That you can only follow one culture, not freedom of culture. Like freedom means you can follow different practices, different cultures, be who you want, dress who you want. One rule means one rule for everybody. You disobey it, you're finished.
2003. Under his guardianship, the Turkish economy boomed at one point as he eroded the dominance of the military over politics. It's quite telling that Erdogan has reoriented Turkey's identity to be closer to its Islamic heritage.
Look at this. All the dictators in one spot. Putin, Erdogan, the Shiites. After 1979, party expansion throughout time, huh? But yeah.
Rather than the secular state preferred by Ataturk. Contrary to the economic success of the early 2000s, the Turkish economy has been undergoing a crisis since 2018 that has seen the value of its currency, the lira.
So all this is after the 1900s. Now we are entering 2000, and what has expanded, and did anything go right? And I'm telling you the answer is no. It started to get worse and worse and worse with time. Just like the title said, how nationalism ruined the Middle East, that's 100% yes. And it expanded throughout time. They made books, ideology, political club with parties. You're reading about it, but yeah.
Plummet. Considering this turmoil, it will be interesting to see how Turkish politics develops, especially since more and more Turks become disillusioned with Erdogan's tight grip on power. As we should know by now, wherever there is economic and political disarray, nationalism can serve as a convenient tool to galvanize the people.
it's also a key to radicalize people. You just don't see it yet because people are so like possessed when it comes to their religion. I'm not saying who isn't. Everybody is when it comes to their religion because it's kind of like who they are, except for the converts. And I made a bet with my friend who is a Christian that how much. So, for example, Texas. And I fear this not because of religion, but what it can do to people because these people have been doing it to the Muslims for many, many years. So education and how you radicalize the people throughout the years. So, for example, I made a gamble about this, that how much do anybody want to take a guarantee is that when Christians read about Muhammad and what happened without having to understand, there were many words. I'm just showing it to you right now. I can show you the Europe War, if I can find it, where Muslims were enslaved by Christians. That's a European war. But without understanding these wars, you're not going to understand anything. You're reading just a fairy tale to be radicalized. So, like, doing that and teaching high school students about Muhammad, you're technically manipulating all of Christians' minds to hate a certain group. And what they can do with violence, I don't know, because this is exactly what happened here. These people filled up with people's minds using their own people as victim cards, or should I say their personal weapon, to launch their ideology and nationalism. And that's why there was so much violence throughout time, which they did. Get this trailer out of the way. AI video. Bye. See, here it is. In political disarray, nationalism can serve as a covenant to galvanize the people. What does that tell you? Radicalize the people. Now, Arabs.
The Arab world, largely under Ottoman rule since the 16th century, faced an identity crisis as modern European advancement exposed its stagnation. Napoleon's 1798 invasion of Egypt was a wake-up call, symbolized by French cannons destroying Mamluks on camelback. Though short-lived, his expedition sparked an intellectual revival movement known as Al-Nahda. One of its early pioneers, the Egyptian Rifa al-Tahtawi, lived in France for 5 years as part of a student mission sent to Europe in order to learn its secrets. He praised French society's Enlightenment values while maintaining their compatibility with Islam. This blend of admiration for Europe and pride in Arab traditions became a hallmark of Arab nationalism. The spread of print media furthered this movement, uniting Arabs through language and culture, whilst emphasizing Arab identity over sectarian divides. Figures like the Lebanese journalist and novelist Georgi al-Zaidan popularized Arab history through accessible literature, reinforcing a shared national consciousness. He was only one in a long list of Arab intellectuals across the Middle East who helped build the founding blocks of modern Arab consciousness, and in the process, nationalism. As the intellectual revival spread, resentment toward Ottoman rule grew. This dissatisfaction was fueled by harsh taxation, which came with little to no state services in rural areas, forced conscription in peacetime to faraway lands, and bloody crackdowns on revolts in Karak, Shobak, and Jabal al-Druz. In spite of this, most Arabs remained loyal to the empire, seeking reform rather than independence. Arab nationalists opposed policies like Turkification and sought greater autonomy, with some even advocating for a dual Arab-Turkish sultanate akin to Austria-Hungary. Yet the young Turk rulers of the Ottoman Empire had little tolerance for dissent. By World War I, some Arab nationalists had begun considering full independence.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
The Ottoman entry into World War I was internalized by the Young Turks as an opportunity to reclaim lost territories and reshape the empire. Aligning with Germany and Austria-Hungary, they launched campaigns in the Caucasus, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. Egypt was lost to the British decades earlier, and Iraq could be used as a launching pad for attacks on the British in the Persian Gulf. However,
Iraq is still being used today in history, believe it or not. Didn't I say that years ago that people use Iraq as a puppet? And Iraq is still not free today. It was used yesterday. It is still being used today.
overextension proved disastrous. Enver Pasha's poorly planned offensive in the Kafkas in the harsh winter months, which lasted from December 1914 to January 1915, led to massive Ottoman losses, mostly due to cold and disease. Jamal Pasha's attack on the Suez Canal also failed, as his forces were outmatched. Meanwhile, the British were steadily advancing in Iraq. Instead of reassessing strategy, Enver Pasha blamed the Armenians, some of whom had sided with the Russians. Though this wasn't the case for the majority, with an Armenian soldier even saving Enver Pasha's life by carrying him across battle lines on his back. Jamal Pasha, who essentially ruled the Levant, grew suspicious of Arab loyalty after failing to raise enough troops for his campaign. This suspicion escalated into genocide. Talat Pasha ordered the deportation of Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians from Anatolia, subjecting them to brutal death marches where over 1 million perished. In the Levant,
so let me recap a bit, like how people now, hopefully this should ring a bell. So this is we're in the Arab picture now. So Levant would be like, I agree. Arabs do have some type of identity disorder, just like the documentary that they do have some. Is like, for example, one direction they want to follow the religion, but then another direction they don't accept each other. They really don't, because they're like, oh, but you're Iraqi, your background's this, but you're this, but you can't be that. That's not Arab. You get what I'm saying? But there you go, back to ethnicity again. Ethnicity and nationalism can never match. Nationalism means, I'm gonna land my plane simple. You either follow one rule, rather you're a Alawite Muslim, Kurdish Muslim, whatever Muslim you are, Baloch Muslim, Sindh Muslim, whatever you are. You follow one rule, that message is all for the non-Muslims, or you're going to be finished. So since their rules, Turks also have expanded throughout time. I told you, after 1900, things started to like go into a pit hole, and so much nationalism has expanded, and we are in 2026. Imagine that. But yeah.
Jamal Pasha imposed harsh food rationing, worsening famine, and cracked down on Arab intellectuals. A raid on the French consulates in Beirut and Damascus allegedly uncovered nationalist ties to the French, leading to mass arrests. With this excuse in hand, Jamal Pasha publicly executed 21 Arab intellectuals on May 8, 1916. Many of those hanged were former MPs and sons of important families. This was the final straw for Arab nationalists and a turning point that pushed many towards independence. This is where Sharif Hussein comes in. As the head of the Hashemite household and autonomous ruler of Mecca and the Hijaz, he had secretly corresponded with British High Commissioner Henry McMahon. Hussein negotiated British support for an independent.
This is where the Brits, as in the Brits, like remember when I said the Brits are the oldest Christians? So this is where the Brits and the Arabs conflict started, from here.
An Arab kingdom in exchange for a rebellion against the Ottomans. Initially hesitant, Hussein launched the Arab revolt after the aforementioned executions, rallying forces in Arabia with Ottoman Arab defectors and British support, including the famous T.E. Lawrence. Many of the revolt participants would become important in the newly formed Arab states and national movements. By 1917, Hussein controlled most of the Hijaz, while British forces advanced in Palestine and Iraq, dealing major blows to the Ottomans. By 1918, Arab forces reached Transjordan and linked up with the Allies. With Germany and Austria hung.
So during this time, let me repeat myself, there were many Jews who lived in Iraq. That leader probably should seem familiar to, especially someone Jewish, because that's the leader who granted Jews freedom until a little changes came in the middle through nationalism, as I said before. Never underestimate what you see. So yes, the Arabs faced consequences too from the British, and you're listening to what happened throughout time.
Hungary near collapse and the Ottoman state bankrupt, an armistice was signed on October 30th. The region's future, completely changed, would now be shaped by nationalist ideology. After the region emerged from the rubble of war, Arab nationalists were disillusioned to learn that the British had betrayed them by secretly dividing Arab lands with the French in the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement. In 1920, Faisal, son of Hussein, attempted to establish the Arab Kingdom of Syria, which included modern-day Jordan and Syria, as well as claiming Lebanon and Palestine. This state lasted only 4 months, as French forces crushed a hastily assembled Arab army at Maysalun and marched into Damascus. After Faisal was exiled to Iraq, where the British crowned him, his brother Abdullah marched towards Syria to reclaim the kingdom.
So yes, so this is like, I think some sources say actually, and people can look this up if they want to, that actually, so the king of Jordan is actually ancestry from the Prince of Iraq, which we know in history today. He has a long history being linked to ancestry's leader, Iraq, the Prince Faisal. There's some certain about sources on brother Abdullah marched towards Syria. So Jordan's actual leader has an ancestry to Iraq. Not many people know that, but yeah.
But instead, he was offered Transjordan, now known as Jordan, as a consolation prize. Though the battle ended quickly, the vision endured. The experience fueled cynicism toward the West. Arab nationalism became focused on removing European.
Okay, boom, we're up to here now. That's exactly how I reviewed history. So there is the Mufti, and all these leaders with the Mufti who are militant nationalists, and these leaders with the Mufti supported Hitler. But listen away.
Colonialism and their perceived local allies. Revolts and strikes against the imperialists, peaceful and violent, broke out across the Fertile Crescent. By the time independence arrived in the 1940s and 50s, Arab nationalism was the region's dominant ideology. However, its narrow.
So let me tell you how this ideology works. I believe I said it before, and I'll say it again. If you're a Muslim, and knowing there's different type of Muslims, like the Sindh Muslims, the Baloch, the Alawites, the Kurdish, there's Kurdish Christians too, and Kurdish Jews too. But if you are forced to practice one and only one practice, and that's not part of your heritage, then that's where all this nationalism mess comes from. And when people are like, oh, but it's Islam, without having to understand there's different type of Muslims. And there's different type of Muslims who practice different things. So like, for example, just like Iran, and when Prince Reza Pahlavi ruled, the Kurdish Muslims were not allowed to practice their heritage, even though Kurdish Muslims, technically they're considered Sunni, but they weren't allowed to practice. They could only follow the Shia law. Now, if you're a Sindh Muslim, I'm not sure what the Sindhi Muslims are called and what practice do they do, but there are different type of Muslims who come from different practices other than Shia and Sunni. But due to, again, one last time, due to expansion of nationalism, it pretty much means whose ideology is going to rule, and that's exactly what's happening. So we're all the way down to 1900 to 2000 with Arabs.
Focus on expelling Western powers often sidelined the broader reformist goals of the Al-Nahda, which sought to achieve a social, political, and cultural awakening. To illustrate, the fallen kingdom of Syria held democratic elections and appointed officials by merit.
But remember when people are like, oh, but Muslim countries were never a democracy, and I laugh about that because people are not looking as they should. They're like, oh, it's Islamic State. So what's this? It used to be a democracy, but you're not reading what happened after that right here. Fallen of Kingdom of Syria held a democratic election, appointed officials. Now, what happened to Syria, and how did from democracy it became into a militant nationalism ideology country, thanks to Assad and all this nationalism expandment? But yeah.
By contrast, most post-independence nationalist regimes became nepotistic military dictatorships.
I believe I said that many times. See, there's the Mufti back there and all these dictators who came into power and forced their way into power. and then lost nationalism. For example, right? I'll give you an example. Right now, there are some Christians who are very excited for the Houston announcement that, oh, we're going to become like, our religion's going to be in school. But there you go back to it again. What about different Christians who don't believe in the same practices? Protestants are not Catholics. Catholics are not Orthodox. Orthodox are not Protestantism. They're not evangelicals. All these mixed Christians and different backgrounds. So then you go killing each other. Who's a real Christian without having to understand? That's where ethnicity differences come in, because not everybody's the same. And if you enforce nationalism, then you're going to just enforce your way in and take everybody's freedom. And even if it means break some rules. And that's technically what they did.
Another key nationalism also emerged in this period, a foreign one, which was imported into the region and brought with it long-lasting conflict. Zionism.
Okay, this is where the story changes. And I've been saying this for years and years and years, and people are not understanding. So after throwing down the democratic monarchies, so when the concept of a Jewish state came, which is what Israelis should understand now, everything is in front of you, since everything became so nationalized, so when it comes to a time welcoming a Jewish state, things were never so successful due to nationalism expansion after 1900 to 2000 and on. And you can imagine what happened after that. Hello, the Jewish state, and you're about to dig into it. What happened after nationalism expanded throughout time?
Developed in 19th century Europe, it sought a Jewish state to protect Jews from persecution. In 1917, British Foreign Secretary Lord Balfour promised Palestine as a homeland for the Jewish people. Afterward, Jewish immigration to the British Mandate of Palestine increased, leading to growing tension and economic exclusion of Palestinians. Protests and revolts were violently suppressed. In 1947, the UN proposed partitioning Palestine between Arabs and Jews, even though the latter made up only 36% of the population and owned 6% of the land. Arab states rejected the plan and declared war on the new state of Israel. But their armies...
That's where nationalism came in. So the military nationalists who are currently in power today from 1900s till now, so when the state of Israel, finally the UN approved it and everybody approved it, they couldn't stand due to their nationalism ideology takeover. Let me put it this way. If you are different ethnic Muslim and you didn't match their nationalism one rule ideology, so could you really picture that they would welcome a Jewish state? No, because nationalism took into all these countries throughout time. Once upon a time, they were a democracy, but that changed. That completely got erased. Just like now, if you look at it, I say to people, then to insult people on X, monitor people's behavior and where is that behavior coming from. So everybody's like big debate is what is Houston about to come because of that new announcement. So, but I'm telling you, after observing Muslim countries, when nationalism took over, what changes did it bring? It's a very simple answer. You follow the rule that they created, even if it means faith. So it means if you're a different Muslim, you follow the Muslim practices they're giving you. If you don't, you're going to be killed. That's exactly what happened to Jews and Christians. And that's what I'm saying in the Christian world too, that if you're Catholic, if you're Protestant, you're evangelical, you're Orthodox, you're Coptic, whatever you are, Mormons, but only one Christian practice can rule. But that's not all of the same Christians, now is it? But yeah, listen away.
Were weak, disorganized, and divided by conflicting interests. Israel not only preserved its UN share, but expanded into half of the Arab portion. The remaining territory was split between the West Bank, defended by Transjordanian and Iraqi troops, and later annexed by Jordan, as well as the Gaza Strip, which would now be controlled by Egypt. In the process, 700,000 Palestinians were expelled, over 500 communities razed, and 11,000 people killed. This event, known as the Nakba, galvanized Arab nationalism. Recovering Palestine became a core goal of the ideology. Disillusioned by post-colonial governments' ineffectiveness, Arab militaries began seizing power. The most iconic case was Jamal Abdel Nasser and the Free Officers Movement. After being besieged by Israeli troops in 1948, Nasser and his comrades felt that they, and by extension Palestine, were betrayed by their government. In 1952, they overthrew the unpopular pro-Western King Farouk, and Nasser emerged as Egypt's ruler. Backed by the military, he placed allies in power and suppressed communist and Islamist opposition. In 1956, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, prompting an invasion by Britain.
Okay, so let's recap. This is when the Islamists fully radicalized everything on the land. The textbooks, the schools, anything linked to the past, it is now officially radicalized. And especially after the birth of the state, the Jewish state, we must make sure our nationalism ideology makes sure that the citizens are fully brainwashed to remember anything related to the Jews, because just like I mentioned that people don't like to read, the Jews were there, but nationalism took over control and everything was changed. Now nationalism expanded from 1900s to on. We're still living in that nationalism ideology, and how he manipulated its citizens, and then it just started to turn into a chaos of war as we proceeded on with time.
France and Israel. Though Egypt was defeated militarily, the US and Soviet Union forced the invaders to withdraw. Nasser used his Voice of the Arabs radio station to frame this as a sweeping victory, and his popularity soared. Nasserist and Arab nationalist movements, especially the Baathists, staged coups in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Libya. They copied Nasser's model, a statist economy, military.
So Arabs officially never believed in democracy, okay? The Turks had one, the Iranians had a democracy, even something stupid as Pakistan once upon a time did have a democracy, right? So now we are in the 1900s, and it's officially fully nationalism. Democracy does not exist anymore. Okay, let me repeat myself. Democracy is removed. It doesn't exist anymore, only national, just like the days of the Hitler's regime. So if people do not want to match the puzzle and say, oh, but this is Islam, okay, well, it had a democracy before the nationalism took over to the lands. Now democracy is erased in the Arabs' history, expansion of nationalism way before, after the Turks, yeah. So now we are living under nationalism movements and violence.
Control and no democracy. A brief union between Egypt and Syria from 1958 to 1961 collapsed, and the crushing Arab defeat in the Six-Day War of 1967 exposed the model's limitations. Arab nationalism steadily declined, overtaken by Islamism and nation-state ideologies. Yet its
Hello, Muslim Brotherhood.
legacy lingered. Nasser's style of governance persisted in Egypt and survived in Iraq until 2003, in Libya until 2011.
And all these faces now seem familiar. They were militant dictator leaders. All these faces should seem familiar to everyone. They are all military dictator leaders who expanded their nationalism throughout time. Saddam Hussein, Sunni nationalist, and all these guys, militant nationalists and Muslim Brotherhood, military Sunni and Shia nationalists. Now, how does this connect the dots? Let me tell you something. So Wahhabis, and after after taking the monarch Prince Reza Pahlavi down and putting Ayatollah into power, so that's when they gave birth to a military caliphate that everybody loves to say, oh, but it's Muhammad. Muhammad is my sentence. Military project is my caliphate. Muhammad is my sentence. Military project is my caliphate in nationalism. And that's when nationalism expanded throughout time. And where are we standing, everybody, in 2026? And the military is still ruling all these lands. You're looking at it. Is it still ruling? Yes, it is. So all these dictators rised with time. And the good ones were killed, who once believed in a democracy.
And in Syria until as recently as 2024.
Iran. Now this is where Ayatollah is coming to the picture, right? You're learning about the expansion of nationalism. All these places started to worship nationalism. So once upon a time, Arabs never had a democracy, but like Iranians and the Turks did. So termination of democracy, and we are welcoming nationalism everywhere. And that's how Israel's stuck today, because it's stuck in front of nationalism caliphate. No democracy anywhere. It expanded before Israel's birth and after Israel's birth. Right away.
Under the Qajar dynasty, Persia suffered from many of the same woes that afflicted the Ottoman Empire throughout the 19th century. However, Persia's modernization process was even slower. The increasing gap in European and Middle Eastern military capabilities became apparent when Russia resoundingly defeated the Qajars twice, forcing them to cede control of the southern Caucasus. This region had been under Persian control for centuries, and the Shahs regarded it as integral to their domain in the same light as the Iranian mainland. Nasser al-Din Shah, who ruled from 1848, brought some modern technology to Iran, but the state remained rather feudal. With a standing army of only a few thousand soldiers, the country was essentially divided into fiefdoms, where local tribal chiefs and notables would tax farms. Oftentimes, they would abuse their power, and the anger of the citizens went to the monarch and his institution. Furthermore, because he did not have the means to enforce his laws, Nasr al-Din struggled to raise revenue for the state. The country's misery was seen as a golden opportunity for the two powers who coveted Persia, Russia, and Britain, in order to gain an economic foothold. As in the Ottoman Empire, concessions and capitulations infested Persia and debilitated the country. In 1872, in a move that reeked of financial illiteracy, Nasr al-Din Shah sold a concession to Baron Julius Reuter, which gave him the sole right to construct mines, railways, dams, roads, and industrial plants at the price of $200,000, which is roughly equivalent to about $5 million today, as well as 60% of the profits. British statesman Lord Curzon called it the most complete and extraordinary surrender of the entire industrial resources of a kingdom into foreign hands that has probably ever been dreamed of, much less accomplished in history. Thankfully for Iran, public outrage reached the point that the Shah was forced to back down. When the Shah tried offering the control of the entire Persian tobacco trade to a Brit in 1891, the people had had enough. It was not only the state's coffers that suffered from concessions, but the citizens as well.
I tried everything: coffee, pomodoro, and binaural beats, but nothing stuck until I tried
The Bazaris, merchants and artisans who once prospered, could not compete against these extravagant monopolies, and the selling off of an industry that employed 200,000 people stung. The Grand Ayatollah of the land, Mirza Muhammad Hassan Shirazi, issued a fatwa banning tobacco's consumption, effectively starting a nationwide boycott. Commoners, clergy, merchants, and intellectuals threw their weight behind the protests. It's said that even the Shah's wives barred him from smoking. The concession was overturned, but this event was the start of something much bigger: Iranian nationalism. The entire nation.
Can you guess what that is? From Shah all the way down to Ayatollahs.
All of its classes and ethnicities had cooperated to overturn a foreign encroachment. Soon the people would identify the system itself as the problem, rather than just the Europeans. The Shah was assassinated in 1896, but change had not come about yet. Instead, it took yet another concession in 1905 to cause a revolution. The new monarch, Muzaffar al-Din Shah, continued in his father's footsteps by mismanaging the country's finances. In 1901, he sold a monopoly over oil exploration in central and southern Persia to British businessman William Darcy. This deal would play a big role in precipitating the revolutionary politics of Muhammad Mossadegh some 4 decades later. To make matters worse, the new Shah took out massive loans from Britain and Russia to pay for the government's expenditure. As a result, he was forced to hand over the entire customs system to a Belgian named Monsieur Naus. Rumors abounded that he would impose even steeper tariffs on the Bazaris, setting the scene for a revolution in 1905. After some violence, defections ensued, and the Shah was forced to cave. He simply did not have the funds or manpower to stop the revolution. Soon, a parliament with sweeping powers was introduced. The Majlis, as it was known, was represented with many ideologies. And on December 30th, 1906, the Shah signed the constitution, which was modeled on the Belgian constitution.
Okay, so let me repeat myself. This is Muslims. The Shah was a Muslim, and this is Muslims having a constitution before the rise of nationalism. Let me repeat myself. This is Muslims. He was a Shia Muslim, and he had a constitution before the rise of nationalism.
This political diversity, almost all factions had a nationalist tilt. A royalist coup in 1908, led by Muzaffar's successor, Muhammad Ali, briefly succeeded before being thrown out by mainly Bakhtiari tribal soldiers in 1909. But as is often the case with Middle Eastern states that initially enter into parliamentary democracy, the Majlis descended into internal conflict. The line separating the moderates and the liberals became more pronounced as both sides dug their heels in and became less willing to compromise. The issue surrounding religiosity and secularism featured prominently. Seeing chaos reduce the central government to ineptitude, the provinces erupted in tribal warfare as various tribes and ethnicities tried to assert their own authority on their territories. The same tribal leaders who won the country back dominated different parts of Persia, negotiating separately with the foreigners and not enforcing state laws. Out of frustration, the Majlis was shut down in 1911 when a force of 12,000 Russian soldiers forced it to dissolve. The revolution might
Russians had power on Iran many years from now. It's not suddenly today, but it has, as history is walking through Iran's history away from the empires throughout time. So from 1900 till now, what role does Russia play in Iran's history? And I can tell you it's a big one.
Been over, but for the desire and drive of a more representative and efficient form of governance in Iran, this was only the beginning. Over the course of the 20th century, there would be two more major revolutions that sought to achieve the aims set out by the constitutionalists at the beginning of the century. This democratic experiment, unique in the region, was spurred on by intellectuals who were sent on scholarships to study in France and Belgium. Apart from their degrees, they obtained an understanding of nationalism that would be integral to Iranian politics for decades to come. Like its French counterpart, Iranian nationalism was initially political territorial, focusing on the state of Iran and its sovereignty rather than ethnic ambitions. Moreover, dozens of newspapers sprung up during this 6-year period, which further spread a sense of unity and political awareness amongst Iranians from all walks of life. During World War I, Persia was occupied by the Ottomans, Russians, and British at various times. The economy was ruined, and many peasants were now forced laborers for the army, causing a famine that killed up to 2 million people. The inability of the Qajars to defend and maintain the country's sovereignty led to a certain Reza Pahlavi, head of the elite Cossack brigade, to mount a coup in 1921. In 1925, he declared himself Shah and embarked on modernizing the country by building infrastructure, expanding education, and creating a real military. Western influences on Reza...
Okay, so let me repeat. Many Muslim countries once upon a time had education. But when it comes to nationalism launches an enforced caliphate due to one narrative of religion. Rather, it's that religion or that religion, but it has to be only one rule. So, for example, if I'm a Sunni, but I'm an Alawite, Shia, so Alawites will not follow things related to that. Or Sind Muslims will not follow things related to that. Everybody has their own practices. So the same thing, nationalism, even though some Christians don't see in Houston yet, and you're going to choose your own chapters, you're going to choose the education that people are going to be looking into through schools, but that's going to manipulate their brain. But why would you replace real education with religious education? That's a whole different story. And you're learning it from here.
Shah were clearly visible over his near 20-year reign of Iran. The nation went into a significantly more secular direction, as seen through his decisions to shut down many Islamic madrasas and Christian missionary schools, and his royal decree prohibiting women from wearing the traditional Islamic chador. He also sought to unify the country under a Persian identity at the expense of the country's minorities, and ruled absolutely. Modernizing autocrats in this period viewed the homogenization of their state as a key principle of nation building. In fact, the modern name Iran, meaning the land of the Aryans, was adopted in 1935, displaying the nationalist trend occurring at this time. Reza Shah's reign ended abruptly when he refused to disavow relations with Germany in World War II, leading to his overthrow by a Soviet-British invasion in 1941. His son, Mohammad Reza Shah, also embarked on a modernization program.
So this is who you're looking at history today, who's supposed to take place Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah, which would be Reza Pahlavi, who everybody is yelling on the internet. It would have been him. And where stuff is taking off, and where did we leave off? So study a little bit deep Iran, inside of Iran's politics and leadership, but listen away.
Whilst ruling as a ruthless autocrat, he aimed to promote himself as the benevolent ruler of a new Persian empire, but could not shake off the allegations that he was a Western puppet by his people. Especially pertinent to this is when Mohammad Mossadegh was elected prime minister in 1951. Mossadegh ran on nationalizing the oil industry. In yet another comical concession, the British retained the vast majority of profits made from Iranian oil. He did this successfully and was wildly popular for it. Unfortunately, the price he had to pay was the MI6 and CIA collaborating with royalists to overthrow him in 1953, restoring Mohammad Reza Shah to absolute rule. The second part of the Shah's reign would see him take Iran's modernization into high gear, due to the increased stake in its own oil, which had been renegotiated to 50% in the aftermath of the fiasco with Mossadegh. In 1963, the Shah introduced the White Revolution, a series of sweeping reforms centered on land reform. Iran experienced a level of prosperity not seen in over 2 centuries, as the nation saw an annual growth of nearly 10%. Eventually, the Pahlavis' corruption took away from their credibility as reformers. So too did the repressive atmosphere cultivated by the Shah's Savak secret police. This political climate, coupled with an economic downturn in 1977, led to revolution in 1978. Under the leadership of the enigmatic Ayatollah Khomeini, the ulama redirected the revolutionary energy into a theocratic direction. The modern Islamic Republic of Iran was born in 1979. As a result, the power of nationalism has been contained by the Ayatollah's regime.
Oh, gee, I wonder who's been saying that for years and years and years, that who brought nationalism into the country? Gee, I don't know, Ayatollah maybe? That people like this Islam. Reza Pahlavi he liked modernization, like how Afghanistan had it. And I have that statement somewhere. I'm going to have to post it one day, where Afghanistan monarchy stated, we are open-minded Islamic country. We welcome Western values. We welcome this. Same for the Reza Pahlavi. He was a open-minded person, and he didn't want women. He wanted women to dress up the way they wanted to, even though some religious women felt that was a threat when women were getting modernized and things like that. They still kept their stuff on, like burqas and stuff, and Reza Pahlavi was against that. But there was no nationalism, so that means they could wear it. Now, 1979, and we welcome nationalism, and let's enforce all of our nationalist rules on everyone. And then, did that happen? Yes, it did. And we're suffering from that time period till still in 2006, aren't we? 2026. We're still suffering from that time period till 2026. We're still suffering, aren't we? Hello, nationalism from the Ayatollahs.
But with a history as rich as Iran's and a national consciousness as alive as in Iran, do not be surprised if nationalism makes a comeback. Nationalism in the Middle East is a unique case. It dominated politics for much of the 20th century, but by the end of the millennium, it had lost popular support in the Arab world, Turkey, and Iran. What went wrong? In short, nationalism, borrowed from Europe, was applied to the region without adapting to local realities. This clashed with deeply rooted societal norms. For a movement claiming to defend the people, it often sidelined their way of life and well-being. The most prevalent conflict between nationalist ideology and Middle Eastern society was over the role of religion. Recall that in Europe, nationalism arose when religious institutions had fallen out of relevance, but this change never occurred in the Middle East. Replacing Islam's role in society was impossible, and reconciling it to secular nation-state ideology proved difficult. In all three of our contexts,
So let me recap, what does that mean? That means that when nationalism expanded, so every Muslim country became a nationalist Islamist country. So if you don't follow that ideology, that stupid ex-Muslims like Dan and Nureya that lived under, you need to know the difference between nationalism and faith itself. So nationalism means if you have other Muslims who have different practices than you, they can't practice due to these people's laws. Same for the Jews, same for the Christians, same for whatever. Until you do not understand what the hell nationalism is, you can talk to 50, 60 different ex-Muslims and they're still not going to answer what nationalism, because they don't know what it is. This is what it is. This is what it is. So from secularism to democracy that Muslim countries were once upon a time were, we are awfully down up to, gee, I should know, as it says right here, in all three on our context, nationalist regimes were faced with Islamist dissent. Ta-da! And I've been saying that to the highest of highest content creator, you are not looking hard enough. This story does not begin with Muhammad. That's 600, 700 years ago. We had a democracy, we had everything, we had it all. But who changed it? Nationalists. And when nationalism expanded in the Middle East, there were many deaths, and it just grew and grew and grew in it throughout time.
Nationalist regimes were faced with Islamist dissent, which they brutally repressed. Nevertheless, Islamism naturally emerged as a leading ideology when said regimes began to falter. In some cases, nationalists were replaced by Islamists via elections, such as in Turkey, civil disobedience, like in Iran, or armed insurrection, like in Syria. Another fundamental fact about many Middle Eastern societies that ethno-nationalists could not change was that they were diverse. Attempts to enforce cultural uniformity usually backfired. The Kurds, split among Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, faced loss of citizenship, language bans, and harsh repression. These policies sparked violent conflicts. Saddam's response to Kurdish separatism culminated in the chemical massacre of tens of thousands in 1988, leading to a successful uprising in 1991. In contrast, part of Islamism's appeal in Turkey lay in its ability to unite Kurds and Turks via their shared religion. Ideological
Gee, I wonder, I was just remembering that a minute ago, wasn't I? There's such thing, because I met a Kurdish Muslims, couple of them, but their practices are different. And since these guys, they agreed to one thing, the expansive nationalism leaders expanding Shia and Sunni ideology without having to understand the curriculum itself, there was expansion of nationalism instead, that whose power is going to rule, and that's the society we are living in currently, which something hasn't changed. That's what I was saying to my friends from Iraq and Syria. Talk to me when something has changed, because I haven't seen shit. But yeah.
Aside, core aspects of Western political culture that are arguably responsible for their developed states, like rights and freedoms, pluralism, and checks and balances, were largely ignored, with nationalists only paying lip service to Enlightenment values. Governments that reject multiple perspectives ultimately fail to meet the needs of their people. A perfect representation of this was economic turmoil, for nationalist regimes often struggled to improve living standards. In Turkey, economic discontent in Anatolia and the southern borderlands helped fuel Islamism's rise. The country's Human Development Index remained low in the 1980s and 90s, comparable to Arab states in the Fertile Crescent, and only improved significantly under the Islamist-influenced AKP. Syria's Human Development Index was even worse. It lagged behind smaller, resource-poor neighbors like Lebanon and Jordan, with some governorates as underdeveloped as the world's poor.
Well, didn't I say that? After the militant nationalists took over, everything was destroyed. Literally everything. It was poor governing and more into their nationalism ideology than the country itself. I believe I reviewed that, but here you go. You are listening to it.
Poorest countries. That being said, economic success alone doesn't guarantee political stability, which nationalists often overlooked. In Saddam Hussein's Iraq, the South was developed to win Shia support during the Iran-Iraq War, even as he brutally repressed Shia community figures. The strategy held until sanctions and post-Gulf War hardships sparked revolt. Saddam barely clung to power, and his divisive policies fueled sectarian violence after 2003. Similarly, the last Shah of Iran used oil wealth to fund reforms and appease elites whilst relying on brutal repression. When oil prices fell, the economy collapsed along with his regime. Economic and political development must go hand in hand. Tying ideological and practical failures together, the nationalist regime simply feared their people. Regardless of one's opinions on their ideas, one must acknowledge that what they were implementing was new and revolutionary. Conscious of the opposition that secular nationalist reforms could spark, the regimes relied on nepotism to secure loyalty, which proved disastrous. Nasser filled Egypt's military leadership with close friends, contributing to Egypt's humiliating defeats in 1956 and 1967. Nepotism also bred corruption, deepening public resentment. In Syria, Bashar al-Assad's cousin monopolized all telecommunications and duty-free shops. His ostentatious wealth sparked outrage, especially during famine in the lead-up to the revolution. In conclusion, understanding the history of nationalism in the Middle East is key to understanding the region's current situation. Along with the figures, governments, and borders that nationalism brought, it also shaped how the region's inhabitants conceive of their histories and identities. As mentioned in the intro, nationalism pushes the idea that those who live on the same land or speak the same language are bound together by a shared history and destiny. In this sense, nationalism has shaped the mentalities of.
And that's what I just said not even a minute ago. You have to speak the same language, you have to follow the same ideology, you have to follow the same traditions. If you don't, you are simply killed. They just said it. That's what it means.
Individuals, along with the state of societies. Even though it had its flaws, nationalism's history in the Middle East displays its ability to unite millions at once, especially in the face of foreign imperialism. More importantly, we need to recognize where nationalism fell short and how, so the diverse peoples of the Middle East may commit to a better future without making the mistakes of the past.
And I was just reviewing that you do not want to do that. Nationalism is a toxic ideology. It is nobody's friend. It does not give a damn what you practice. If you don't follow the rules, you are going to just get simply punished. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about anything at all, and people need to understand that. So that was my stream. Now, if anybody is ready to play religious nationalism, I hope you know that it never works, no matter whose book it is in power. It just doesn't work because there's different people. I mean, for example, I would say maybe Jews are the only ones who practice the same book, similar ways, just being different, but they practice the same tradition. But the Christians and the Muslims, there's different type of Christians who have different practices. Like Orthodox are not Protestants. Protestants are not Catholics. Mormons are not Catholics. And all these different type of Christians. Same for the Muslims. The Kurdish Muslims have their own practice, and other Alawites have their own practice. But when it's one rule, one language, one everything, it never works. So I hope people understand from this that this is what corrupted the Middle East. Nationalism and religious nationalism. Keyword, nationalism. So when people say, oh, but it's the religion, no, you must be kidding. Wait till your religion comes in line and there's nationalism behind it. You're going to feel the same way the Muslim does. Like, oh, no, but that's not what the religion is. Oh, but yeah, it is. You're profited. So I'll give an example. Let Christian nationalism come in and all these politicians make their rules. Christians are going to feel the same way that Muslims do. They go, but that's not the religion. And when Catholics don't want to follow your tradition, you're going to feel the same way. But that's not what Jesus said. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus never said to do this, that, yada, yada, yada. Same concept. I'll land my plane there. So never, ever use nationalism. It's not your friend. It's the toxic ideology of mankind. Take care, y'all, and I hope you learned from this.